1, 2, 3.
Nah, I'll come in whenever I want. What's happening, YouTube? It's your boy BountyTank checking in, man. Got my guy Tony Sylvester in here. You already know, the Italian stallion, man. But on a serious note, we gonna touch on the topic of bail reform. We did this once before, and we are back again. There's always some shit going on and trying to attack our jobs, but we gonna educate you on why bail reform is bad, is a bad thing. So we're gonna walk and talk, get a little workout in also, and chat, so we can educate y'all.
They must have had sent paperwork from Florida for cosigns, okay.
You gotta pause.
You stretching it out?
So, what is bail reform? Like, what are they trying to do right now in Ohio? And I know they've done it, or try to do it in other cities, states, Jersey, Cali, New York. So what exactly are they trying to do here in Ohio now?
Well, their intent, what I'll preface it by saying, what they say they want to do is to lower the general population of the county jail by essentially making a series of offenses not require bail. So the theory is that if these are all summonsable offenses or just book and bail, what they call catch and release, that somehow that's going to decrease the jail populations because it's A, it's costing the government too much money, and B, there's just this myth that there are thousands of people just languishing in county jails, that they're poor, that just can't afford to get out of jail, and if but for the fact that they had a bail, they would just be walking free. The reality of the situation is it's really a soft on crime situation, because the people that are conceiving these things clearly are not stakeholders in the process. So what it's amounting to is a revolving door situation where and this is true in the Ohio bill as well as a lot of the other ones we've seen in New York, New Jersey. They tried it in California and the people repealed it, but it would have went into effect. Where essentially they've got, the guy stealing a candy bar from the bodega and the drug dealer feeding from the same trowel. So they're not making a distinction on, felony versus misdemeanor. So, I guess you could make the argument, well, I'm just stealing a loaf of bread to feed my family, but they're extrapolating that to go, well, I'm just selling crack because, my kids need new shoes. And that's not what they're saying, but that's the way it's written. I mean, in the Ohio bill, and I gotta admit, it's 270 pages, and I haven't read the whole thing in depth yet, but I've read the prospectus as well as a lot of the actual provisions without reading all the law behind it. They're pretty clear that if they consider it a non-violent offense, they're going to make it ticketable, and that includes sex crimes. So not rape, because they consider that violent, but importuning and GSI and a lot of these things, kiddie porn on the internet type of things, they don't see any reason, as this thing is written, for these people to sit in jail. I mean, they don't even see a reason for them to be detained. They think that they should get a summons and that's the end of it. But conversely, they have a list of stuff that they want to detain you on preventatively without bail, like even a misdemeanor domestic violence charge, which quite frankly is the easiest charge ever to lay on anybody with no evidence. The standard of probable cause to make the arrest has become so low, it's just he said, she said is enough to get somebody arrested and charged. And there's a presumption of detention on those charges in the Ohio bill, meaning if you're gonna fight your girlfriend and you leave and she goes, she shoved me, under the current system, most counties would grant you bail under a schedule. There are some counties that would make you go into an initial arraignment, but there's still a presumption of bail on all offenses that aren't capital or like treason or murder, very small, 2 or 3 crimes. Under this bill, the presumption would swing towards detention. In other words, they would detain you without bail, and within, I think it's 48 hours, you have to have a detention hearing, which is something apparently different than an arraignment, which amounts to, again, whether it would be implemented like this, but in the language of the law, it's a mini trial. You're going to have to present evidence and witnesses, and they're going to have an actual hearing to decide whether you should even be granted bail or any other condition of release. And if the judge does give you a bond, he has to write down on the record what his rationale was for allowing you to get bond. Right now, under the Ohio Constitution, everyone, it's a constitutional right to have bail.
So that's everybody, no matter what.
Everybody has a right to bail. There are very specific instances where they can deny you that right. But again, it's the reverse of what they're proposing. You have to have, I think it's a Rule 8 hearing, and you have to have an entire present of proceedings where you have to meet a burden to deny somebody bail. That's why it almost never happens. Even if the bond is very high, because the crime is serious and the presumption is great, you're still entitled to bail. It's in a very rare case that they would deny you that right. They want to turn this on the opposite, where in their discretion, if you are in a certain class of crime, you have a presumption of detention, and you have to beg and show why you should be released, which is the exact reverse of what our system is now, as well as, the 8th Amendment to the federal Constitution. Although those are, that's another issue. You have to understand, and they're not going to say that. Nobody's going to say this, because this is not something that if you were trying to sell someone something you would lay out front, is that if they want you out of jail, then they're going to make it easy for you to get out of jail. But if they don't want you out of jail, they're going to make it tremendously harder for you to be released. And they're essentially going to consolidate all the means of release in the hands of the same state that's prosecuting you. So if I were a judge, if I thought there was even a remote chance that if I gave somebody bond, it could come back on me as an elected official, because I have to put down my thought process on paper in the case, I would generally lean towards detention, because it has the least risk for me. And in states like Maryland and New Jersey that have implemented a similar, it's not quite as draconian as this, but a similar set of situations, you've seen the prosecution detention requests go through the roof, because when in doubt, detain them. I mean, nobody wants to be on the front page of the paper because you went soft on somebody and they go out on a murder spree. So when given the option, if you're looking at this as a prosecutor or a judge, you're always going to err on the side of caution, for what's best for the system. But that's not how our system is set up to work. There's a presumption of innocence.
Let's break it down for more layman terms for people who might not even understand what the fuck we're saying. So right now, everyone, no matter what, depending on the circumstances, if you get in trouble, you have the right for bail to get out of jail, to fight your case outside of jail. And what bail reform is trying to say right now is they're keeping poor people in jail. Correct?
Yes, that's the tagline.
So they're saying right now it keeps poor people in jail. The purpose of a bondsman is if you can't afford to get out of jail, to pay the court, you have us to give, you give us a call, we'll finance you, we'll help you get out where you can make payments. And everybody has that right now. So basically what Tony is telling you right now, they're going to take that out of the hands of us, and basically it's going to be determined by a judge or whatever algorithm that they're going to set in place. So tell me about this algorithm.
Yeah, they're vague because they don't know what it is yet, because there's more than one. But yes, they want to use a computer program, an algorithm, to run everybody through and kind of to get a probability of your risk of flight and dangerousness and these things. And they want to use that to aid in the detention decisions and who gets out and what conditions they set, or if they just detain you. And they want to use that in conjunction with, like I said, the prosecutor, the judge, and the defense, to try to make these decisions. But it all comes down to the same thing, which is the reason that you have a right to bail is because it's a protection against tyranny, because the government they have to give you a bail. So if you can reach it, the government has to release you. As long as you do not break the conditions of that bail, which would generally only be committing new crime or not showing up to court, you are free to live your life free of government tyranny, to fight your case, to go to work, to operate completely as normal while the system looks to adjudicate your case, guilty, innocent, and in between. What they want to be able to do is say, well, there is no bond now. So we're looking at your case, and we've determined that we're going to let you out of jail, but you're going to be on 24-hour electronic monitoring, you're going to go to drug and alcohol counseling, and you're going to go to anger management. And if you don't like those things, you're going to sit. There are no options. So why would you go to drug and alcohol counseling if you don't have a drug and alcohol problem? You haven't been proven guilty to have one, but they're going to impose it on you. Why would you go to anger management if you didn't commit the offense, if you're presumed innocent? They're going to impose these conditions on you. And electronic monitoring is the most devious of all of this because it's more expensive than a bond by far on average because it's a continued expense. The bond is a one-time thing that you pay that can span into perpetuity regardless of time or any other circumstances as long as you don't break the conditions. GPS monitoring is paid for by the day and it's billed by the month. So if it takes you 8 months to adjudicate your case, you may run into thousands upon thousands of dollars in monitoring fees. And then if you don't pay them, they'll shut the monitor off, you go back to jail. I mean,
that's crazy.
Wow. You know, the monitoring, people don't understand it. And maybe this is, as a bondsman, the part that scares me more about the monitoring than the financial cost is they know everything you're doing, when you're doing it, what you're doing, who you're doing it with. And so, you know, are you private about your religion? Well, you're not now, because when they see you show up to the synagogue every Sunday, they know what your religion is. Are you private about your sexuality? You're not now, because they know whose house you're sleeping at, or what clubs you're going to, what bookstores, whatever. And there is nothing in the law anywhere that this data has no expectation of privacy. It is not secured. And I can tell you, as a guy that did some house arrest vending at one point, that data, if it isn't already being sold in the aggregate to advertisers, it will be. Because Facebook sells your data, Twitter sells your data. The reason these companies are worth billions of dollars is, and you're not paying for the app, it's free, is because they're collecting all your activity and selling it in the aggregate to targeted advertising for people to sell you products. Nothing is more evasive than that bracelet, and nothing will give them more detailed information. You can set your phone down and leave or go to sleep. That bracelet follows you everywhere you go. It has an active microphone on it that you can flip on and listen to conversations. And I know that because I've done it. So your whole life becomes an open book, and there is nothing preventing the dissemination of that information. Imagine being on a misdemeanor traffic case that you are not guilty of. But in the 90 days that you're wearing that bracelet, they are able to collect data which implicates you in another crime, and they use that data to charge you with a new crime based on a crime that you didn't commit.
Man, that's crazy.
Because that's the reality you're looking at.
Wow.
I've seen it happen. And I mean, I've seen it happen in the reverse too, where the bracelet actually proved someone innocent. But I've seen it implicate people in new crimes.
Wow. So, say you get in trouble and you appear in front of a judge, no matter what, right now, their constitutional right, they have to give this guy bond, unless under, you know, some crazy situation where this guy's a flight risk or harming himself or somebody else.
Pre-trial, in other words, while the presumption of innocence still exists, you have a guaranteed right to bail, and it can't be excessive, and you know, it can't be, there can be no like cruel and unusual conditions on the bond. But yes, not only are you guaranteed to bond, it has to be reasonable. Doesn't mean affordable. And that's the thing that everybody's fighting about is, oh, well, this needs to be affordable. People are in jail because they're poor, they can't afford it. There's no, and this has been tested federally and locally, there's no constitutionally guaranteed right to an affordable bail because that is a sliding scale. What's affordable to me is not, you know, isn't what's affordable to Jeff Bezos, which is another interesting provision about the craziness of this Ohio law, because it would base monetary bond on your stated 25% of the disposable income of your stated income, which, let me blow your mind, I don't think I told you this. So let's say you or I get in trouble and they give us a bond and they say your disposable income is $2,000 a month, so we're going to base the bond on 25% of that. What if Bill Gates is driving through town and smacks his old lady and he gets a misdemeanor domestic? Based on their mathematical formula, his bond for a misdemeanor domestic may be $25 million.
Man.
That's there's no parity. It almost reads like a wealth tax.
Wow. So basically, the more money you make on paper, the more your bond can possibly be.
Correct. You are
no matter what the crime is.
Correct. You are being punished based on your assets because there's that formula does not take into account public safety or appearance or dangerousness or past history. It's a mortgage calculator. It's here's your liabilities, here's your assets. We have determined, and nobody knows who's going to pay for all these credit checks. I mean, the unfunded mandate this creates would bankrupt the state of Ohio. But putting that aside, it's a very simple formula. They're going to run you through the calculator, and this is what we think you can afford to pay, so your bond's going to be set at that. So Willie Escobar, who I'm pretty sure didn't file tax returns, would have probably got out for free, whereas, if Elon Musk gets froggy and catches some trouble in Cleveland, the city may be flush with Dogecoin. I mean, that's where we're at, because it doesn't make any allowances for that. It's a straight mathematical formula based on disposable income.
Let's try to put this in perspective. So, okay, you got two people. Let's say you got two DVs. Domestic violence, if you guys don't know. You got two people. One guy makes $100,000 a year. He makes good money. The other guy, he makes nothing on paper. He's a hustler. He's in the streets, which is a lot that goes on a lot in this business. So let's say they both beat their woman up, beat their old lady up. So you're telling me both these guys commit the same crime, but because this person and they committed domestic violence, they hurt someone. You're saying that the guy who doesn't make that much money will have a cheaper bond than the guy that makes more money, and they committed the same crime.
As it's written right now, let's say all the circumstances up and down the line are identical, and it's just about stated income. Yes, if they determine to give both those people a bond, at that point, running them through that calculator, the amount of the bond will be totally determined by whatever their financial affidavit is.
Wow.
Correct. That's how I'm reading it, and other people have read it, and they haven't dissuaded me from that notion. It doesn't seem to make any allowance, and there's no discretion. It's like a mortgage calculator. You run it in, and this is what you got. So, the amount of judicial discretion that it takes away is insane, because, I mean, basically what they're saying is if you're good at hiding your money, you got a blank check for mayhem, but if you get in a bad way and, you're successful, you're going to pay through the nose. And that's why I said it reads almost like a wealth tax as opposed to bail. And because it's almost accomplishing the opposite of what, like I said, they're worried about people with no means not being able to get out of jail. Ohio law right now already provides that everyone shall be released on the least restrictive means necessary, and that there's a presumption of a signature bond for most nonviolent misdemeanor offenses. That presumption already exists in the statute. Now, how it's being applied court to court, if you wanted to have some real reform, there's a very simple way to make those changes. We saw it during COVID. All nonviolent misdemeanors and even some nonviolent felonies were all do not arrest summons, because the statute already explicitly states in Rule 4, in conjunction with Rule 46 in the criminal code, that at the discretion of the officer or the arresting agency, as a policy, every nonviolent misdemeanor is subject to a summons. So if, there was a meeting of the minds and a directive went out that said, on these petty theft, disorderly conduct, driving under suspension, driving without a license, basically any crime where the state is the victim, where it's the people of Canton, Ohio versus Joe Blow. Those people don't go to jail, they get a ticket. The law provides to do that. All you would need is some bipartisanship and some coordination at the state and local level. That could be done today. I mean, what time is it? It's 12:45. By 4:30 today, that could be done, if there was the political will to do it. And as a guy that makes his living getting people out of jail, I think that is really the reform that's necessary. But government doesn't do things subtly. Government isn't a scalpel, it's a sledgehammer. And that's what this bill is. It's just, drug dealer, wife beater, dog killer, whatever, we'll just throw them all together in the mix and see what happens. Whoever wrote the statutory code in Ohio was much smarter than me, And they clearly foresaw situations like this. So the law already provides for every reform that this bill attempts to make and gets wrong. You would actually have to make the argument that there are a bunch of felons languishing in jail because they can't afford bail, and that they should be subject to release. And if any public official wants to make that, I mean, I'm more than happy to talk or debate or have a dialogue with anybody whose position is, I think when you have mid to high level felonies, you should not have to be detained.
So let's double back. I like to give examples. So let's say right now you get in trouble for drug trafficking. You get in trouble for drug trafficking. Right now, they can give us a call and we can determine, all right, we can get this guy out, we can bail him out of jail. If they pass this new bill with this bail reform, basically the judge can be like, no, I don't want this guy out. It could be personal reasons. They could just personally not like the defendant and say no.
Yes, they absolutely have the power to detain. Now, there may be some hoops they got to jump through to get there, but just the gravity of the crime, I would imagine, would be enough justification saying, no, you can't be out. I mean, and there was some sponsor testimony that took place this week, the sponsors of this bill, and the one state senator very clearly said, yes, we just want the power to be able to hold people if we don't like them. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, not quoting him, but that was the gist of it was, we don't want you out. Wow. We're okay with keeping you in there, which is the scariest shit I've ever seen as far as a violation of your personal liberty.
Wow. So let me ask you this, if they pass this bill that they're proposing, who directly is this going to affect the most and why?
Well, it would obviously first directly affect the deceptively large number of people that are going to become trapped in the system that have to go through this nightmare, especially the guinea pigs in the very beginning before they realize how broken it is. I mean, like I said, imagine, you know, you're working a job, you're in your 40s, wife, 2.3 kids, house, you know, been on your job 20 years. You have an argument with your wife, and neighbor calls the police, and based on an argument, you go to jail, and you're just stuck in the system for 3, 5, 7 days. Maybe they order a mental health evaluation, because they can do that under this bill, and just hold you, you know, for observation. That's part of their argument. You could lose your job sitting in jail because you're poor. I mean, this bill almost guarantees that any person that's accused of a domestic violence is going to go through the meat grind. Which, by the way, statistically, domestic violence is the most overreported and least convictable crime, that, at least anecdotally to me, and I would guarantee the stats back that up, because it's a crime that occurs in a moment of passion where, quite frankly, people lie. There are a lot of real victims of domestic violence, but I've seen a lot of people go, well, he was trying to leave the room, he brushed up against me on the way out the door, and I called the police, but now I regret it. If I had a nickel for every time that I heard that, I do have a nickel for every time I heard that. Never mind. Anyway, but the larger, as to who's most financially impacted, is going to be every tax-paying citizen in the state of Ohio, because this creates a series of unfunded mandates. Everything we've talked about, who's going to pay? Who's going to pay for these GPS monitors? The bill says it's at no cost to the defendant, taxpayer. Who's going to pay for this gigantic institution that's going to have to be created to check every defendant's finances, to have these detention hearings, to call these witnesses, present this evidence, create the unified court state system to collect and disperse this information statewide. They want to create a statewide pretrial services division. I mean, what else? They're going to have to collect all this mental health information in a way that complies with HIPAA, and it's got to be stored securely. The costs go on and on and on. You're easily into the hundreds of millions of dollars. That burden has to shift to the taxpayer. There's no place else for it to go. And, you know, Ohio is already part of the Rust Belt, so you're going to probably see it in ridiculous property and sales tax increases. I mean, they will probably claim, oh, well, the defendants will pay for it with their fines and costs. Well, what are you going to do when they don't pay their fines and costs?
Yeah.
Throw them in jail? That's the debtor's prison you say you're trying to avoid. So you're not going to get it out of fines and costs. The court's already assessing fines and costs in every case, and it's what helps to power all the municipalities, the county, the clerk's office, the police, that money's already cut up. And another good point is, every time we post a bond in the state of Ohio, we pay into the Victims Reparation Fund. We pay an $85 fee for every felony that goes to help victims of violent crime and the public defender's office. Millions of dollars a year. Where's that money? That evaporates. No bonds, no VVCF. I mean, the unintentional consequences of this bill are even more egregious than what they're intentionally trying to do, which I'm going to assume their heart's in the right place, but you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I never understood what that phrase actually meant until I started getting involved in government. Now I figured it out at this point.
So we take care of, basically we kind of fund the public defender's office in a way.
$25 out of every bond posted goes to the public defenders. The balance goes into the Victims of Violent Crime Reparation Fund.
So this could directly hurt the public defender's office and really leave people who don't have money without counsel.
It will hurt the public defender's fund. It will take away a source of funding. It will also hurt the victims advocacy groups and everything to do with that domestic violence, because the balance of that money goes to fund that. Wow. You know, and conspiracy theory time, if they want to talk about wealth inequality when it comes to bail, the next thing they're going to do is go, well, why is it fair that you can afford a high-priced lawyer when I can't? Everybody's going to end up with a public defender. It's all going to be that's the next war they're going to fight. And you're already seeing it with the Southern Poverty Law Center and some other places in other states where they're starting to attack private criminal counsel and say, well, it's not fair that all these people have to use the PD, it's ineffectual counsel, but if you got money, you can go buy the best attorney money can buy. Look, they're trying to get to you, Johnny, average citizen. We're just in the way. I mean, we're the low-hanging fruit of the criminal justice system that they're going to use as a speed bump to rocket to a bunch of other probably well-meaning but crazy reforms that are just unfeasible and, quite frankly, would have devastatingly negative consequences to both stakeholders and the average Joe.
They're talking about keeping this right now. The jails are keeping poor people in jail. I mean, they passed this bill. We take away from the public defender's office. It sounds like more people will be fucking in jail.
What will eventually happen is, yes, they will start warehousing people, because the problem is that it'll start out like, oh, well, all these minor misdemeanor and nonviolent misdemeanor offenses and some of these felony offenses, just get out, take your ticket and go. But what happens is, every time you go through that algorithm on a new case, it scores against you. So then once you start dipping into the red, they're going to warehouse you. They're going to detain you because the algorithm's going to say, detain them. And if you don't give them bond, they're there for the stay. And so eventually, you're going to start stacking people with no way to get out. Then you're going to have to start trying to either repeal the law, amend the law. The sheriff's going to start saying, screw it, emergency releasing people. It ends up with a catch and release, soft on crime approach. Once I know that I can steal less than $1,000 and never see the inside of a jail cell, what am I going to do? I'm going to go steal something less than $1,000. Once I get caught and I don't sit in jail and I know the law prevents me from going to jail, the difference between 1 theft conviction and 10 theft convictions is just 9 summonses. Because the judges, due to economy of jail space and what they call judicial economy, will almost always run all the cases concurrent, meaning they'll lump them together rather consecutive, which would mean one after the other. So your sentence for 1 theft and 10 thefts are going to be about the same. So the next 9 times I'm stealing, I'm playing with the house's money. That's why you see these spikes in crime in other states, because people may not be educated. That doesn't make them stupid. Right. If there's one thing people will figure out how to do, if you give them a system, they're going to figure out how to game it. And it will happen quickly. And, you know, again, it's going to be catastrophic. Even if it takes 18 or 24 months to really rear its ugly head in full, it's not going to be good. And we've seen that happen most recently in New York, where they've repealed part of the reform law and they're attempting to repeal the rest of it. And it's worth pointing out that what they did doesn't go a quarter as far as what Ohio's proposing. They just started making summonsable offenses. They're not making people run through the meat grinder of detention and mental health evaluation and bracelets and anger man. They're not talking about all these crazy detention conditions. They're just summonsing them. And that's had a catastrophic effect.
So in New York, I remember there was a story, and I think you told me, I think there was a legal immigrant that killed someone, vehicle homicide.
Hit and run.
Hit and run, killed him.
Yep.
And all they got was a summons.
Right.
And we're right back out.
The guy ran, he was wanted on ICE hold. In New York, obviously is not friendly towards ICE, so that didn't matter. And they tracked him down, charged him with vehicular manslaughter, gave him a summons. I don't know whether he appeared on that case or not. I would suspect he didn't. Full disclosure, I don't know. But I know, yes, somebody lost their life. The guy had numerous other cases, both pending and past. Didn't have a license, didn't have insurance. Ran and fled and hid. Somebody died, gave him a ticket.
Got right back out, wow. And I know they did this in Jersey also. And I hear it's like the wild, wild west out there with the crime, like, because they're just releasing people right the fuck out of jail.
Yeah, it's the same system is, we're gonna detain you, or we're gonna just let you go with conditions. And again, what you've seen is the detention requests go through the roof, and a lot of the, because there's no jail space, no money, no will, they're denying a lot of the detention requests. But what's happening is, again, the state incurred all these costs, they're going broke. They're now desperately searching for money. They said, we'll pay for it in fines and fees. Well, guess what? People aren't paying their fines and fees. They're going, hello.
I'm sorry if I got
No, you're good,
No,
you're good,
fine. Yeah. New Jersey is going massively in debt. And again, gonna raise property tax, raise sales tax, jam it on Joe Average. The 85% of people that never see the inside of a courtroom are gonna pay the burden for the people that are repeat offenders. And there are a lot of good people. There was a case that, Holland went to a federal circuit court. Guy lives in Pennsylvania, drives across the bridge to New Jersey to watch a Phillies, and I think it was the Phillies and the Giants game. Bar fight breaks out, he hurts somebody. He's detained in New Jersey. He's eventually released on an ankle monitor. Loses his job because they said, you can't leave the state to go to work. Well, I work over the bridge. Too bad.
Wow.
Done. Begged for a bond. Give me a secured bond. Let the bondsman bond me out. Anything, just so I can have freedom of travel. Don't deprive me of my liberty. No. Bracelet or sit in jail.
Wow. Man, that's tough. That's tough. Man. Well, I mean, people think that you need structure. Without structure, you have chaos. And I don't think people actually see how this will affect them with just releasing people until crime hits them or their loved one is affected. Well,
that's almost guaranteed to happen. In this, if you went to the system, that's guaranteed to happen just by human nature. But the scarier part to me is you're depriving people of their liberty and lying to them and going, well, nobody's gonna go to jail anymore. You're all gonna get out. Nobody's got to pay. That greedy bondsman just sitting in jail, or the greedy court taking your deposit bond money. Everybody's gonna get out of jail. Nobody's gonna sit in jail unless we don't want you to get out. What? Nothing. Don't worry about that last part. Don't you worry. Look, we got you. When has the government ever hurt anybody? I mean, we're good government. We're here to help. Nothing's going to go wrong. When's the government ever done anything wrong or inefficiently? I mean, and that's what they're asking you to do, is they're asking you to put all your trust in the government to handle pretrial detention. That they're never going to make a mistake. They're always going to let everybody out that should be out and keep everybody in that should be in. And that they're just omnipotent and benevolent, and to basically ask you to give away your right, your constitutional right to be free pending your trial. Because you have that bail. It's a very good PR campaign someone's running. Bail keeps people in jail. Bail detains you from your liberty. It's evil, and it's just grubby, money, hungry people scheming to keep you in jail. Bail is a liberty-promoting enterprise. Bail is the instrument that protects you from government tyranny. I can tell you right now, with a fair degree of confidence, based on bondsmen that I've spoken to down south who were involved in this, the civil rights movement in the 60s was kind of undergirded by bail, because before they went and protested at a bus station or did a sit-in at a court, they paid the bail bondsman up front, because they knew that even though they were not granted full equality. They had a constitutional right to be free of tyranny. The bondsman was paid ahead of time because they knew what the bond was going to be. Civil rights protesters knew they were going to get arrested, and they only sat in jail as long as it took to be booked and released. I promise you, the government in the 1960s, if they would have had the ability to go, you're a danger to public safety, you're rabble-rousing, we think it'd just be safer if you sat in jail until the pendency of this matter. You wouldn't have civil rights because they would have used it to quell all dissent.
That's deep.
It would have happened. I mean, it's a known fact. It's not something that we understand 50 years later, but it was known to people at the time. Bail, the bail bondsman, and bail in general, because you can always pay bail yourself, was seen as the bulwark between government overreach and individual freedom. It's crazy, and you kind of see it no matter what your politics are, or you think about these kooks that ran into Congress on January 6th in their buffalo hats and their face makeup. The reason that you're still hearing about these people detained in federal custody on misdemeanors, misdemeanors is the federal system actually allows someone to be held without bail in a very narrow circumstance if they can provide an enhanced showing of dangerousness, which is what they argued on these federal charges to keep these people detained. Now, you don't hear about that much because the federal system, frankly, only prosecutes a few thousand cases a year criminally. Most of them are white collar. At the state level, I would suspect Ohio has 88 counties and 200 and some courts. They probably adjudicate hundreds of thousands of criminal cases when you count traffic. You know, and that's the problem. So you're going to take very rarely is someone charged with a federal crime that's either not white collar or really serious. State level, there may be 50 or 75 people in any courtroom on an arraignment on any given Monday. In Cleveland, it might be 175. You're going to have 50 mini trials in every court every month. It's not feasible. It's prohibitive in manpower, money, and deprivation of liberty. I mean, it's third world country stuff. I mean, you could, not just political dissidents, but any opponent, rabble rousers you don't like, this gives you the pathway to detain them. And you know, the thought that no one would ever abuse that power, you don't have to look back that far through the history of any government, including the U.S. government, to see they took people's rights. COVID, wear a mask, sit in your house locked down, we don't care what your rights are, do this or else. I mean, the government just took away your rights for a year. We're just now getting them back. Last year at this time, we wouldn't have been allowed to film this in this park because we would have been locked in our homes huddling in fear or else. You don't need to look back to the 60s. You can look back to 2019 and 2020. You know, it's right there in front if you want to see it. I'm not a complete conspiracy nut, but I don't trust the government. So regardless of my vocation, because I could, contrary to popular belief, go and do something else. I have a couple other skills. I would never trust the government with absolute power, because every time throughout history they've had it, they've absolutely screwed the common man.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. Some of y'all that watch this, you know, me and Tony have, and other bonds, you have clients that you've been getting out for years. They in the system. They always get into trouble, but you develop a relationship with them and you get them out. I got guys, I'm sure he do right now, they get in trouble, they call us, we get them out, drop it down, we get them out. And they've been doing this for years. They passed this bill, that shit stops. You know? The judge might say, oh, this guy's got in trouble 50 times, we're gonna let him sit. I don't want him out. Versus us, we're not looking at it like that. We're looking at this guy's getting in trouble, he goes to court still, but he gets in trouble a lot. The judge might have something personal against you because you keep getting in trouble and your ass is stuck in there. So think about that. There's no more calling us when you're in trouble. We are your scapegoat. We get you out when you're in trouble, man. We're the first person you call, you get in trouble. I got people that have me on speed dial. And so does he. I have people that still call me from 10 years ago asking for him. So think about that, man. You get in trouble. If you like a career criminal and you get in trouble, and it might not be serious thing, it might be you just a bunch of misdemeanors. I have people, they probably have 30 misdemeanors. They're always catching misdemeanor cases. but we get them back out. Don't mean they're necessarily bad people. They just keep fucking up. But the judge can say, you know what? Nah, let's leave them in there. Let's let them sit down for a while. You're losing your right.
I'll give you a prime example. I have an entire small sect of clientele that I have been bailing out on nonviolent traffic offenses for decades. And quite frankly, every time they're driving without a license, driving without insurance, they're amassing a criminal history because those traffic offenses are punishable by jail time. If you look at their record, oh, this is horrible. But it's all non-violent. The state is the victim. The algorithm is not going to be kind to those people just based on their history. But, you know, they go to court, they make it right. They just, for whatever reason, refuse to comply administratively with the Department of Motor Vehicles. Those people shouldn't be in jail. And frankly, unless they're in trouble often and they just don't get the hint, they shouldn't even be getting a bond. And probably the first 5 or 10 traffic cases, they didn't get a bond, they got a ticket. But the judge realized they didn't respect the authority, started making them bondable. Now the judge is gonna go, well, I could go one step further now. You're a menace on the road, sit. And if anybody's ever been in arrears of the BMV, you know how hard it is to dig yourself out of that hole. So once you start going behind with them, you know, it's almost an impossible task to get right. And people gotta drive to get to work. I'm not condoning it, but I sure understand it.
So the algorithm doesn't see the person. It doesn't see, you know, the circumstances of what's going on in this person's life. They just see numbers.
It's a probability engine.
Yeah.
It can't see a person. It's not a living, thinking. A judge is a human with thoughts and feelings and has discretion and experience and can weigh these very important matters. No machine can account for human decision making. The machine is a probability engine. It's looking at you and hundreds of thousands of people just like you in similar circumstances and crunching those numbers, so you're literally being judged by your peer group. If you live in the wrong area code or zip code and you're in an area with a high crime rate, with a high failure to appear rate, that works against you. The algorithm will crunch those numbers and judge you based on what other people did in similar circumstances.
So wait, you're telling me if you just grew up in a bad neighborhood and you can't get out that neighborhood, because you live in that neighborhood, that's going to affect you getting out of jail with the algorithm?
The algorithm is not a crystal ball. And as far as I know, there's no sorcerer in the back waving a wand. So it has to be based on historical data. There would be no numbers to crunch without present historical data. So yes, you know, it's looking at socioeconomic status. It's looking at geography. It's looking at age, race, gender. It's looking at all these things. It's crunching hundreds of thousands, if not millions of cases into categories and dropping people in those columns. Now, we don't know exactly how they do this because, here's the other thing they won't tell you. The algorithm is a copyrighted computer program that outside people are selling and renting to the courts, and they don't even let them know what's in it. It's copyrighted material, so you can't see the source code. You don't know how it works. It's a black box. You're just supposed to trust that just trust that it does what it says it does. I could have 5 rabbits back there picking carrots out of a group and going detain, detain, detain. Hey, let this guy out. Hey, look, the algorithm works. Because there have been studies where I could pick lottery balls out of a tub and be about as accurate as that algorithm. I mean,
that's crazy.
It is what it is.
Well, we hope we're not gonna talk you guys down. We're gonna have a part 2, a part 3, and shit, we'll have part 20 if we need to. So get you guys educated on what's going on. So we're gonna finish our little trail walk and chat. Y'all enjoy the views, man. We'll be back for a part 2, man. Make sure y'all go follow my man Tony, Sly Bonds on Instagram. What's your Twitter? Same thing?
Sly Bail Bonds.
Sly Bail Bonds on Twitter.
If you really want to see the smoke, yeah, you gotta do the Twitter too.
Yeah, I seen his Twitter. He be in there going in. Catch y'all later, man.
These niggas talking shit and hating on my come up, stick to hunting. Eat a dick, fucking get that is my rebuttal. I'm the quarterback, so shut your fucking mouth while in this huddle. Listen, first to ever do this, and I don't believe in subtle. So I'm screaming, fuck 'em, beating on my chest just like a